Very excited about how we begin the third hour of the Elias Matko Show, because we begin with a familiar voice to CJAD 800 listeners, a familiar face to anyone who's been looking at Montreal media over the years. Leslie Roberts, who used to host this very time slot on CJAD, joins us on the line. Leslie, welcome back.
Good morning, Elias. I love what you've done with the place. I listen daily. Big fan. Congrats.
You are so kind. And of course, we've chatted a little bit over the years, sometimes on social media and that kind of thing. And I do appreciate that. So, Leslie, let me just throw something at you, okay?
Yeah, go for it.
And we're going to get into the hard topics. And I've teased up, we're going to talk about Montreal Pride and that kind of stuff. But let me just throw one thing at you that I've noticed. You know, you left CJAD, right? And then you go on, you live life and that kind of stuff. And of late, I've been seeing your name in a lot more places. You're writing your opinions, National Post, Montreal Gazette. You're joining boards like the TALQ, right? The old QCGN, they got a new name, right? You joined their board. So what's going on, Leslie? It seems like you've made a decision to, I don't know, get back in the game. Like, I don't know how to put it, but it seems like you want your name out there. You want people to hear your thoughts.
In a nutshell, what happened was, during the pandemic, I was doing 3 hours of television in Ottawa and 3 hours of radio on the sister station CFRA and CTV Ottawa. And quite frankly, got burned out. And so after the pandemic, when my contract was up, I said, guys, I'm going to take a break. Then I started to take off my journalist hat and I started looking around and saying, what is going on with the world? This is not the world, the country, the city that I grew up in. And so after decades of using my soapbox, whether it was on CJAD or CFCF, for those of you who remember, that's old CTV Montreal, or the former, before CTV Montreal, I said I can now use my voice / opinion for good. And that's what I'm doing, to answer your question. And whether it was for first the National Post on the whole Middle East situation, the Gazette, it was the same, the Pride Parade, which we'll talk about in a second, or even at La Presse, where I was standing up as a Quebec Anglo saying, hey guys, Saint-Jean-Baptiste needs some Anglo voices there too, which, by the way, may be surprising to some. I got a very warm reception as I went on French radio to plead my case and said, we're Quebecois also. And they said, you are, absolutely. So I'm hoping next year you'll hear some poetry of Leonard Cohen. Now, I'm not holding my breath, but let's hope on the Saint-Jean-Baptiste Day celebrations next year.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's an example. Like the word inclusivity can have a lot of different meanings, and it can be something like that, right? Inviting Anglophones to be part of La Fête Nationale. Okay, so Leslie, I want to tackle your latest piece in the Gazette, okay?
Yeah.
The headline is Pride Parade has lost its way with a policy of exclusion. Now, for those who aren't aware, Fierté Montréal, Pride Montreal, disinvited some groups from the parade, Jewish groups from the parade. Now, I want to read you a statement here, Leslie, from Fierté Montréal, okay?
Go for it.
We denounce all forms of violence. We amplify the voices of queer communities who, on our stages and in our spaces, express their support for oppressed peoples, particularly the Palestinian people, and their opposition to genocide. Now, I know, I just want to say off the top, it's not genocide. I mean, we could spend a half hour just actually going through it. I want to, let's not have a debate about that word, which is used improperly here. But what do you say to Fierté Montréal and their decision to uninvite certain groups?
That they're wrong, and it's time for a reset and accountability. I agree with everything you said about this specific case. I'll go on to say that exclusion is the opposite of what Pride stood for, past tense. Mm-hmm. It was inclusion for obvious reasons. I mean, I don't have to tell you the history of the LGBTQ++ communities, and that's a whole other discussion we can get into with all the extra letters on that acronym. But that being said, this is blatant. This was, I'm sorry, you are a Jewish Canadian, therefore you must somehow be connected to what's going on in the Middle East. How they connected those dots, how they did the math, I don't know. But to me, at the end of the day, excluding someone for their heritage, for someone who is equal Quebec, where we all grew up here, Anglo Jews. I'm not a Jew, but I stand with them in this case because of the fact that they're Jewish. They're being excluded. That is anti-Semitism, in my opinion.
Well, what do you say when they say, well, no, it's not about Jewish people. It's about Israel. What do you say when you hear that?
And why are Quebec Jews being held accountable for what is happening in Israel? And number two, why is Pride Montreal, Fierté Montréal, even involved in this? This is about standing up for issues in the gay community. And also, I'll add, if I had someone from Fierté in front of me, I'd say, do you know what would happen to a gay man or a gay woman in Gaza?
Yeah.
Did you know that in Israel, and I was there back in May, that the gay community lives openly and proudly and are accepted? What is wrong with that picture, in your opinion? And I hope they would get it.
So what do you think's going wrong in the brain when, something's wrong there when you can have a group, and it's been brought up before, Queers for Palestine, right?
Yeah.
People that if they went to Palestine would face the most horrible of fates, yet they're defending that side.
Well, we'd have to go big picture. The movement that was Pride or even the gay rights has evolved in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned since my day. Back in the 80s, as I struggled with who I was, I could not discuss it publicly I was told I would lose my career. Mm-hmm. That is not the case anymore. Here I am, a gay man living my life, talking about it on the radio. So that we've evolved through that. And Pride is about celebrating the wins, whether it's gay marriage. Those of us who are married go out into the suburbs and raise our children and, care for our elderly parents and have barbecues with the neighbors. And so the moderates like myself have gone on with life. Unfortunately, the extremists have now taken over. The extremists want the pendulum to go further in the wrong direction, further to wokeism and to the left, and further outside of its mandate of celebrating Pride to include the politics of division, i.e., pro-Palestine does not belong on the streets of Montreal in a Pride parade, point final.
Leslie, as I look, and it's not just Montreal. I look down recent memory, last 3 or 4 years, Pride parades, Pride groups, not just in Montreal, Toronto, New York, Fredericton, Halifax, Boston, Philadelphia, where they've had to cancel in certain years. And they've canceled primarily because of infighting. So by the way, like last year, there was there's security issues, right? Yeah. But that comes from infighting internally within the organization. I know there's some of that infighting happening in Montreal, but what do you think it is the pervasive thing where we're seeing cases like this again in Pride communities and Pride groups, Pride parade organizing groups across North America?
Well, I would say it's fear of being labeled homophobic, to be honest. If you were to speak up and say this, quickly the finger pointing would come, oh, you're the problem because you're homophobic. As a gay man, I get a pass, Elias. That's why I'm speaking up. And I speak for a lot of mainstream gays and lesbians, I would say. I think that people are fed up with the way it has been hijacked for politics. And it's time that we speak up as a community and say, hey, we don't feel the way these people with megahorns feel. We don't want to take a stand that doesn't involve our rights and our victories and our celebrations. We don't want to alienate the allies. And that's what's going on here. There is pushback against the community. And I think it's time that those of us who remember, who stood on the shoulders of those who fought, who unfortunately were often beaten or murdered, others who went to jail back in the day, we need to honor their memory for their celebrations and say, we are here, we are able to live our lives like everybody else, we are equal, we are not special.
I think it's really important to talk about this, especially at this time of year in this city. Continuing our conversation here with Leslie Roberts, a longtime broadcaster in this city, used to host this time slot right here on CJAD. He's been putting his thoughts to paper of late in both the National Post and the Montreal Gazette, and we've been chatting about issues at the Pride Parade. And Leslie, thanks for sticking around here. I want to tie into what you just said. And you recently penned a piece for the National Post. The title of that piece was LGBTQ rights used to be about equality. Now it's about ideological coercion. Leslie, I feel this subject is one of the most touchiest subjects to deal with on radio, on TV, in national media outlets. I feel it's tough. You don't want to hurt anyone, you know?
Right.
But I find, here's what I mean by that. I find when I have discussions with people at dinner parties, in real life, my gay friends, they'll talk one way, but if you've got a voice publicly, we'll talk differently. I wonder if you think that's part of why it's such a touchy subject right now.
Well, I think there's a lot going on here to unpack, but I'll start speaking from my experience. When trans became the headline in the movement, the trans folks, we witnessed very much the same struggle that we had years ago, that we fought and won, basically, for equality. The trans folks are trying to do the same thing, and they've hitched their letter to our acronym, LGBT. And so within the gay movement, there's a struggle because LGB, lesbian, gay, and bi, is a sexuality, whereas T is a gender issue. Why are we all lumped in as one? So that is the discussion within the community right now. That being said, do we abandon our so-called brothers and sisters based on our own experience, or do we speak the truth? And that is, well, let's get real here. And I think it's hard for a straight man alive to have this conversation without offending. As someone inside the community, I want to also, like you, have this conversation without hurting anybody. But at the same time, we have responsibilities to discuss what the consequences of actions are. For example, at what age do you start giving children who are identifying as the opposite gender medical assistance, whether it's drugs, beta blockers, which slows the hormonal process, or surgery? And that's the debate society has to have, and has to have it with respect. The problem is, going back to what we had in our last segment, the extremists are pushing the agenda, and it is forcing the conversation to a spot where they want it to be, so that they won't have the kind of pushback, because they too know that there have to be some rules in place in our society. And I think that's where we're at. And I think we have to have the courage as a community, courage as a society, so I would include our allies who aren't in that community, to have a conversation, a real look at it. I mean, the politicians won't touch this. Let's face it. You've got some brave ones who will, and then unfortunately they quickly get branded. I think we need to get past that, and we need to figure out who is it, who is the expert, who is it can take a look at this, who is it that can then recommend something in law, to be honest, to protect our kids.
So, Leslie, what do you think? Because there has been a recalibration in other parts of the Western world. I think you could look to Europe. You can look south of the border of the U.S.
The UK.
Or the UK, right?
Yeah.
They have gone towards that center where 80% of us find ourselves, right, I feel, on this issue.
Yeah.
But it seems like in Canada, it's like we're the last place where, whether it's political will, as you've mentioned, and also media will and that kind of stuff. Yeah. What do you think is going on in Canada where it's so hard to recenter the debate here?
We're too nice. We are Canadians. We want to accept difference. We want to understand other people. But when that, when we are our I guess I would say our openness is taken advantage of, we need to push back, and that's where we're at now. Now, someone with a higher pay grade than me, Elias, needs to figure out where that is. But we have to have that conversation now, because the road we're headed down, I don't see it ending well.
So, and on that front, right, I've had discussions with, and it relates to our, as we start off this discussion and talk about the Pride Parade in this city, I've had discussions with people who were with Pride Montreal, and they feel that they were forced out. And when I asked them, well, why did you leave? They point to the fact that, a classic L, a classic G, a lesbian or a gay person isn't even welcome anymore inside an organization like Pride.
We're living our lives, Elias. We're getting on with it. We're doing what everyone else is doing. So the representation is very small. And that's the problem. The loudest voices in the room are winning.
Did you leave Pride, or did Pride leave you?
Oh, well, I would say I didn't leave the left. The left left me. So I would apply the same thing. I didn't leave Pride. Pride left me.
And, we talk about how this plays out. We're with Leslie Roberts, wrapping up our conversation here on how this plays out. Again, I know we're Canadians, we are too nice, but in other parts of the Western world, there has been that recentering. Do you think inevitably we get there in this country?
Oh, yeah. Look, the voices of reason are speaking up. And that's why I'm coming on with you and being so open about it with you, Elias. And I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for hearing me out. I think that the damage that's being done is worth noting because, and I guess I appeal to the LGBTQ plus community to understand that the pushback is happening, and we see it down south where they're trying to restrict take back the rights that we have in some cases, in some states. And unless we speak up for what our moral compass stands for, we're going to pay the price. And I think that it's unfortunate we got to this position. We should have learned from the past, and we haven't.
Let me ask you a tough question. This is a tough question, I think, to answer.
One.
I know it's a tough question to answer, but it's also a tough question to ask, okay? Yeah. Do you think right now you're free in a way that you wouldn't be if you were still on daily radio, daily TV?
I would like to say, I would like to think not. I know I'd be called into my former boss's office and sort of say, okay, make your point. How did, why did you do it this way? And that's normal. That's our boss's job, right? No matter what the topic is. But I will tell you, and this was not that long ago, and I haven't shared this with anybody. When I left CFCF and went to Toronto, my bosses in Toronto didn't know that I was gay until 3 weeks in. This is 2001, Elias, not that long ago.
Yeah.
They held an emergency management meeting, and they asked, what are we going to do if it gets out? The year after that, I was signing a new contract, and they added a clause. And the clause said, I cannot discuss my private life without permission first. Now, you might say, well, why the hell did you stand for that? Because in those days, the shame was normal. You hid it just to get by. And that is what we fought for, and we won. And now, and this is the truth in every cause. You can go too far. And that's what my fear is now, because when you go too far and the pendulum goes back the other way, everything that was acceptable, may I say in quotes, normal today, may not be in the next generation.
Do you think, and Leslie, it's unbelievable to hear that story and realize that the digit 2, the number 2 was the first digit in that year, right? I mean, that to me is shocking. Yeah. Do you think in all of this, it's going to take leadership from the top? And when I say top politically, the Prime Minister of Canada, is that where you think the nation is looking to for guidance on this?
Well, if we look back to the previous Prime Minister, I'd say he's part of the problem, or was part of the problem. Mm-hmm. This is a test for Mark Carney. He's got to navigate carefully, but he also has to do so many other things first that I think this is not on the priority list. And so I think as a society, as people like you with the soapbox, Elias, and me with the opportunity to do op-eds, I think we need to kind of say to everybody, calm down, don't get angry, let's figure this out. We're better than this. We're Canadian. We're reasonable, and these are people too. But how do we also at the same time put into law protective measures to make sure that there aren't abuses? And that's what I see as the scenario. And I'm a Canadian. I'm an optimist, and I think we can get it done.
Leslie, thanks for adding your voice to this program today. Hope to hear you real soon.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Elias.
That's Leslie Roberts right there, former CJAD broadcaster, and in fact, former host of this very time slot.